Today, a new escalation from President Trump announcing a fresh tariff hike on Canada. And it comes after an international spat over Ontario Premier Doug Ford's use of a 1987 Ronald Reagan radio address on tariffs and trade. The Reagan Presidential Foundation says the ad misrepresented Reagan's remarks and is reviewing its legal options on the matter. But back with us, we have Dawn and Susan and Jenna. So, Dawn, the president accused Doug Ford of using this ad to undermine the president's case at the Supreme Court over his authority on tariffs. And Ford said he's going to pause running the ad tomorrow after Trump ended trade talks. What message does Trump's tariff increase over a commercial send?
The president is spectacularly petty. We know that. We've known that for 10 years now. His ego is always at play. And that's why if you want to make a deal with the president, it's best to say nice things about him in the public sphere. And if you don't want to be punished, it's probably best to put your head down. So when you're Doug Ford, I understand you want to be provocative. You want to win the attention economy. But there are real ramifications in this Trump presidency for speaking out in a powerful, creative, and frankly, artistic and entertaining way like this. The president does not take kindly to being shown up. And I think, unfortunately, he has shown that he is willing to impose tariff authority in order to get back at people who we think are publicly making fun of him.
So, Susan, big picture, is the president taking this seriously? With prices rising, American wallets are stretching thin, and you've got some industries like manufacturing and farming showing some warning signs. Is this what America needs right now? I mean, why is he doing it? Can it really all be just about the pettiness that Dawn's referring?
It's about pettiness, and the president has gone completely unchecked. Let's not forget the Senate is supposed to authorize these types of actions. And with the Supreme Court case coming up very soon about if the tariffs are in fact legal, I think this case, in this particular instance rather, is going to be very interesting because there is no, quote, national emergency around a commercial. And that must have his folks in the White House a little upset right now about how this is turning out, because his authority, the president's authority, is not, in spite of what Donald Trump thinks, it is not whatever he wants it to be under the conditions he wants. But again, he is petty, as Don points out. This is what he does. And he has now gone full in on these tariffs. Now, maybe long term they can work, Alex. I'm not saying they can't because we don't know. But I know in the short term, they are going to create a great deal of pain. And I don't think people are going to be able to absorb that pain and still support Republicans.
So, Jenna, let's pivot here to former Vice President Harris being asked in a BBC interview about the state of the country and the current administration. Take a listen to what she said.
I was asked if he was a fascist, and I said yes. And the reason is that I look at what is happening right now. And again, it is what I predicted. He said he would weaponize the Department of Justice. He has done exactly that. You look at what has happened in terms of how he has weaponized, for example, federal agencies around going after political satirists. There are not all, but there are many that have capitulated since day one, who are bending the knee at the foot of a tyrant.
So Harris went on to say that she has unfinished business from her time in politics. Is there still a place for her voice? Do her accurate predictions afford her more recognition, more credibility, perhaps now in the eyes of Americans? Oh, turn it on.
I am. Hi. Alex, if you can still hear me,
Yep.
I apologize. That's so embarrassing, particularly after we've all been trained for years on that. Alex, I think it's an irrelevant question for 2025, in that there have been so many people, including Kamala Harris, who have raised the red flags on his behaviors and the consequences on not just Americans, not just America long term, but also the world. I think she is not stepping away away from the very large microphone that she has because she's in the trenches with us. I don't want to get caught in this cycle of should she run or shouldn't she run. She is doing exactly what I'm so grateful to her for doing, which is calling out who this man is. And she is absolutely right. He is weaponizing his theoretical control. And I appreciate that Don corrected himself when he said tariffs versus terror. I would suggest that when we have somebody who can't be criticized from a commercial, from something that Reagan said in 1987, that it is wreaking terror from a narrative perspective. And I'm so grateful that Kamala Harris continues to be in the trenches with us.
Dawn, Harris repeated her very brief campaign. It was not enough for anyone to have the time to ultimately successfully campaign. Are the next 3 years enough time, or do you think her window has closed?
Well, first of all, I think she's immensely talented and would be a very good president. But I would suggest that history shows, with the exception of Donald Trump, it's very hard to find anywhere where a major party has repeated a nominee. So that's kind of voter feelings, is that they kind of want a fresh shot at it with someone new. That's why you don't see Michael Dukakis or Al Gore taking another shot at it, despite the fact that they would have been extraordinarily qualified 4 years later. And so, I have not seen any voter sentiment or history that suggests that tends to be what we do. But of course, I think she would be a very good president. And of course, the 107 days wasn't enough and it was unfair. But I don't see, with history as a guide, I don't see it being that feasible for 28.
So, Jenna, the DOJ announcing that it's going to monitor polls in select California and New Jersey counties in the November 4 elections. I mean, look, it's a longstanding function of the DOJ, right? But should voters be worried about what they see at their polling locations? Is this potentially a scare tactic if it is only blue states that are being watched?
Yeah, it's so interesting that they're putting a lot of emphasis on California and New Jersey. I wonder what's happening there next week. I would say that absolutely, but this is a part of the authoritarian process that has continued to play out very successfully for countries like Venezuela, Hungary, and Turkey. But there is something different for us today. We have these little devices in our hands that give us a different level of power and control as citizens. I would urge folks to sign up to be poll observers. So for the handful of federal workers that they send to the polls in Jersey or in California, we can have 100 poll workers who are observing. It is important that we make sure that we hold the line that transparency is ultimately going to be the thing that keeps the strongman theories and ego, as Don pointed out at the top of this segment, in its place.
Okay. Last question to you, Susan. From an independence perspective, will this be seen how Trump might want it to be seen, as protection against the election meddling that he and his supporters claim has been a problem since 2016? Or will they see it as something more sinister?
I think they'll see it as something more sinister, especially with everything leading up to this point, with using the National Guard the way he has and tried to go into cities, depending on how that shakes out. But this looks like Trump, again, trying to use the military to overuse his power, and to, frankly, at this point, there will be a good campaign to show voter intimidation. That's what this is about. That's what his campaign has been about since he's come into the White House again, is to intimidate and scare people. And that's what he's doing here.
Dawn and Susan and Jenna, it's good to see you all. Hope to see you next weekend. Thank you.